All right, so I'm just going to kick in, and we're recording this session, folks, for people that want to pass it around to friends afterwards, and also for if you want to go back and rewatch it. And we'll be making this available on social media, et cetera, et cetera. So first of all, welcome everybody to this fireside chat Q&A via OpenEXO. My name is Salim Ismail. Many of you, I think, know me. I'll give a quick background to put some context here. I'm the founding executive director at Singularity University, and we got asked all the time, what is the future of higher education? If you have kids, you're constantly being asked and thinking about the question, how do I deal with the digital world with kids in the mix who get very addicted to screens, and all of our applications and are kind of geared to getting you addicted. And so how do we deal with that? As I said at the beginning, I'll just repeat, I have an 8-year-old son and dealing with this in real time. And as I give talks around the world, based on the work that I do now called exponential organizations, or how do we organize ourselves, both private sector, but also government and public sector and our institutions, to deal with this new world. Almost every single talk I ever give, I get asked the question, how do I bring my kids into this? How do I deal with my kids in this model? So rather than try and repeat that question 100 times, I figured let's record this webinar. We're super lucky to have with us Nicole Dreiske, and I'll introduce her in a minute to really talk this through. And a couple more things. A few years ago, lived in Miami, and we actually created a school, a new school on a model called social constructivism, based on the alt school model in San Francisco. And so having built a university and kind of Lily, my wife, having actually launched a school, we're kind of really in the mix of this from different ages across the board. We're now talking to several heads of state. For one, the Prime Minister of Thailand, who wants to know, what should I do with the future of education? And that question is popping up more and more in this. We're going to kick off, and just Nicole a second, ask questions, and then we're going to open it up to questions and answers for the general audience. So think about how you want to handle that. Samantha, Sam, you're on. I think hopefully you can help moderate if people have questions and so on. But let me get started with who Nicole is, and I'm really, really thrilled about this. Nicole Dreiske is the director for the International Children's Media Center. She's an educational innovator, children's media expert, and the author of a book called The Upside of Digital Devices: How to Make Your Child More Screen Smart. Literate and emotionally intelligent along the way, and use the digital media to do this. She's the creator of the Screen Smart Accelerative Learning Approach, and she works with schools, teachers, school districts, and corporations. Nicole has now worked with hundreds of thousands of children around the world, and there's about 10,000 kids that I understand have been trained in this model. And I think the really umbrella perspective is that the initial reaction that we have with kids and digital media is ban the screen. And that's the best way to keep the thing, limit screen time, 15 minutes a day, keep it on a strict diet, et cetera, et cetera. And Nicole's approach is, hey, if the kid's addicted to the screen, use that as a constructive mechanism and use it to teach critical thinking and other mechanisms. So let's dive right into this. Nicole, first of all, welcome, and so thrilled that you're here.
Thank you, Salim. This is going to be great fun because of the specific audience who's so engaged with tech themselves. So this may surprise you, but I'm going to dial into these big articles. I don't know if you saw them in CNN and USA Today about this new study at the Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center. And what is really important about it, it's that it's for the first time they've made correlations between brain development and screen use. And the study showed that young children who get more screen time than doctors recommend have significant differences in parts of the brain that support language and self-regulation. Focus on those two things, language and self-regulation. And so, you know, this study was published in the journal of, let's see, it's the AMA's Journal of Pediatrics, and it followed a string of studies that were released this year on the effects of screen time on our youngest humans. And so a March study found that mobile phone use can delay expressive language in 18-month-olds. Canadian study, published in April, found that screen time affects attention spans in preschoolers. And another JAMA pediatric study in April found that screen time can have an effect on how a child performs on developmental testing. Now let's go to the older age group. On the adolescent side, in 2018, the NIH in the US, National Institutes of Health, launched the largest and most ambitious study of adolescent brain development ever attempted vis-a-vis screen use. And so scientists are really trying to get a handle on how screen time impacts the physical structure of kids' brains, their mental health, and their emotional development. And this study is happening in 21 sites across the country, and they're going to follow more than 11,000 kids for a decade, and they're spending $300 million to do it. It's the largest government study ever attempted of adolescent brain development, and it's called ABCD study, the Adolescent Brain Adolescent Brain Cognitive Development Study. So the first wave of data from brain scans of 4,500 kids produced some really interesting soft pedaling from the study's leader, Dr. Gaia Dowling. And for example, the MRIs found significant differences in the brains of kids who use tablets, smartphones, and video games more than, now get ready, it sounds like a lot, 7 hours a day. But here's what that does. So it is premature thinning of the cerebral cortex. Now, what I found a little bit odd about this was that Dr. Dowling was very careful to say that they don't know that premature thinning of the cerebral cortex is a problem. What do you think? Since thinning of the cortex is traditionally associated with Alzheimer's, dementia, aging, obviously you're going to have problems. Now, circling back to Cincinnati, what was interesting there is that they had a completely different kind of test. It was a special test called diffusion tensor MRI, which estimates white matter integrity in the brain. And what happened was that they found that higher use of screens, this is preschool, kids who haven't even gotten into kindergarten yet. So higher use of screens correlated significantly with lower expressive language, the ability to name objects, processing speed, and early reading skills. Like I said, it's the first study that actually documents associations between higher screen use and lower measures of brain structure and skills in preschool age kids.
Okay.
Now, let's go. I'm doing this, Salim, because you cannot not get motivated. Yeah. The reason, they are study upon study upon study, and yet the big change is not going to come from schools, it's going to come from parents. And that's where it's not yet happening. There are actually 4 big reasons. You want to know what they are, or can you guess?
Wait, can we get back to that? I want to kind of step back just a second.
Sure, go ahead.
I want to spend a couple of minutes on how you got here. So you started with curating children's film festivals, right?
Yes. Now here's the thing. I started with a 16-year study of accelerative learning. It was called Matrix and Multiplicity, and it used 13 separate and distinct techniques. Then I became the founder of the first children's film festival in the Americas. So for the very first time, you had international film festivals that kids could come to. They were in Chicago, I had a big one in New York. But so what I was trying to do was wrestle to the mat kids' fascination with screens in a new way. I was trying to solve it with content instead of direct intervention. So the content approach was great. There's nothing wrong with that. Better content, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics and a lot of other folks, is a huge step in the right direction. Excuse me, that's a big duh. But what was different about the festivals that I did, you couldn't just come to the festival to watch a movie. I challenged kids to learn how to watch a movie before they started watching. And what happened was that learning went through the roof. We had 87% of teachers were evaluating a one-off event and saying critical thinking and literacy skills could be improved.
Hmm.
And that was, when I saw that, that was striking. But what was really kind of a knock your socks off moment was the pediatricians coming in and saying, and again, they were invited as observers. They wrote us beautiful letters of support every year. A group of 3 came in the late 1990s, and they said, one of them, you're changing brain chemistry around screen time.
Right.
And because that was not then rocket science, nor is it today rocket science, and because it's something anybody can do, any teacher can do it, any adult can do it with any child, and any parent can do it, I left my big fancy festival and started the International Children's Media Center to focus on ways that we can engage our kids and get them to engage screens differently. Now look, there are 2 engages in that sentence. We engage the children, we're the conduits, and through our interaction, the child is engaging the screen.
Got it.
If you
Yeah,
look
there's a difference there. But okay, so let me pause for a second. I remember going to the Brooklyn Academy of Music, where you're curating the New York City Children's Film Festival, and watching the kids. And if I remember right, and correct me where I'm wrong, you took them through 4 stages. Step 1 was the kids would have to write a critique and just not just watch a movie. How do they feel about the movie? How did it make them feel? Level 2 was what were the characters doing and why? Third film roughly was, what do you think the director was thinking? And the 4th film was, what would you have done differently? And if you look at that from a critical thinking point of view, you're basically leading kids through a critical thinking path. And what you've done, I think, that is utterly brilliant and unique, is you've hacked the kids' addiction to rich media, and you're using that as a vector to teach critical thinking, literacy, emotional awareness, self-reflection, etc. And so that's, I think, the big, incredible innovation that you've created. Well, so tell me where I'm right or wrong about that.
Well, there are two let's condense that, because we would talk to the kids. We call it priming. You know, if let's tip our hats to Malcolm Gladwell. We prime the kids before they engage the screen. And if you prime positively instead of turn that off and go outside, or God, why are you watching that? Or you really have to do that again? Okay, so that's all negative priming. The child is there with the screen, and all of those extremely valid adult expressions negatively prime. If instead what we're saying is, hey, what are you thinking and feeling about what you're watching? Let's talk about that. That was the way we would cut through all this apprehension on the part of kids that we were in fact going to somehow constrain them with respect to media. So let me just start this process. If you're a child and you've never been there, the first thing I'm going to say is, okay, today we're going to do something a little different from screens. Normally you just come, sit down and watch, right? Right? Okay. So today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to use our energy and our concentration, and we're going to keep our minds awake. Now, with the festival, it was easy to bridge that, because if they're watching 15 movies in a single shorts program, how are they going to vote on their favorite films unless they keep their minds awake? Okay, so now I'm saying that to you as an adult, but I say it to children in a way that's just totally fun, so that, okay, dudes, you're the only ones that are going to pick the best movie of this festival. How are you going to do that if you can't remember all the movies? Okay, so here's how we're going to remember them. We're going to do something nobody else does. We're going to think about our bodies and get energy into our bodies, because we're going to use our brains, much better if we have energy in our bodies first. Okay, now I'm doing this. If I do it for very young children, I tone it down. I'm gentler. I'm a little slower. The way I was just doing it with you, Salim, would be maybe ages 6 to 10. If I'm doing it for
pretty much my maturity level, so that's
all right. No. But I did it because of Milan. Okay.
Sure.
So, but for the surly 8th graders, for the high school age kids, it's really a completely different start. And the starting point is this: where does everything that we see on screens go, where does it go?
In your
Does
head.
it fall on the floor? I mean, because they're sitting there, they're not wanting it. Does it fall on the floor? Does it fly out where does it go? It goes in here. So let's talk a little bit about how much we're watching. And so I can do that 8th grade and up, or I can do it tiny children. It's like, how much are you watching? Do you watch before school? Do you watch after school? If you're ages 6 to 10, it's like, let's think about that. Don't tell me how much you want to watch. Just tell me how much you're watching. All right. So, and then older. So how much time are we spending? Are you on your phone in class? Is 90% of what you do on a screen just homework? Yeah, I believe that. Okay. So you have a pattern. You have a way of working with every age group. The main thing is, where does it all go? It goes in here. But then we talk about how much, and they'll tell me. They raise their hands. Everybody wants to talk about how much they're watching, how they're using it, et cetera, et cetera. We get some numbers. So we calculate it very quickly. So what is that? Is that 10 hours a week? Is it 20 hours? What do you think? How many hours is it? If they're tiny children, at the end I can say, you just told me you're watching before school, you're watching after school, you're watching on weekends. That's like 1,000 hours a year. In truth, it is much more, but 1,000 hours is a whole lot to a 3 to 7-year-old. Okay. Older kids know that they're watching 1,600 hours a year. Okay. 1,600 hours a year, dude. Where's it all going? It's all going here. No wonder you can't tell me the name of your favorite film. Okay. So now hold on.
Yeah.
If it all goes in here, maybe it would be good if we had an idea of what we were feeling and thinking while we were watching, because I don't know about you, but I don't want things getting in here that I don't know about. That's the way I do it with older kids. With little tiny children, it's, do you want things getting in here that you don't know about? Because if I'm watching and it's 1,000 hours, and how many people told me that they talk about what they watch? Zero. Not one of you talked about talking about what you're watching. So it's all going in, nothing's coming out. Wow. So how did you feel on that weekend when you watched for 7 hours, when you played Fortnite for 7 hours straight? How did you feel? How did your body feel? That's a good thing to know. All right.
So you're starting off with, at the very least, self-reflection, self-awareness, and you're getting them to be aware of themselves in the context of watching the screen. Okay. Now, if I want to kind of jump forward a little bit.
It's something important is that when they talk about it in front of their peers, they have this aha moment that it is that everybody is affected. And that maybe I should pay attention to what's getting in here. That's all. You just want that little awareness, because who wants to be manipulated? Who wants to think that they can be manipulated by media and technology? It's a really important starting point.
So you start with that little intervention that you need to be in control of what you're watching and be aware of how it's making you feel. And then you start from there. Now you have the kind of wedge to expand there and say, okay, how does it make you feel? What would you do differently, et cetera, et cetera.
But here's another really huge and important part. I'm genuinely interested in their answers. I don't care. I don't have an agenda. I don't have a preconceived notion of what they're going to say. Whatever they say is okay with me. And they know that. And so when I go in and I am saying, hey, listen, I don't care whatever else is going on. What I care about is what you're noticing. You can't have a wrong answer. It's impossible, because what you're feeling and thinking can't be wrong, because it's what you're feeling and thinking. And that's what nobody else knows about. And so I'm going to say that in there, and very much a part of my book, is that the way we as adults engage our screens, meaning, okay, I'm like this, I'm like you are right this minute. Okay. Or
I'm taking notes.
I know, but the way we are is modeled by our kids. And so if we're very quickly always looking at this is the primary screen, then they are secondary to that. When I put that away and I'm just talking to them and the screen is in the background and then we're going to interact around it, it completely shifts the paradigm of, wow, this screen is so important. And now I'm using it just the way daddy does. And I'm going to be solo with it. It is the isolation and the solitary nature of screen use that is destructive, Salim. It's not the content. It is how we have this idea that it is outside of community, outside of normal family relations, that it will always have to be a segregated activity. And in early childhood, that needs to shift so that parents spend time with screens with kids. In other words, stop segregating screen time from the great outdoor and fun things you do with them. Some of the time, spend time with them with screens so that the cuddling, the laughing, the disclosure, the sharing of ideas, the questioning that you do when you're reading a book aloud to a child happens while you're watching a short piece of media. It doesn't have to be a feature film. There are YouTube videos that work great for this kind of interaction.
So you do at ICMC mindful viewing workshops.
Correct.
Right. And so that's essentially what you're doing, is you're teaching them to be mindful and aware of what they're watching.
I teach them to, first of all, it is a sensory multidisciplinary approach. I wouldn't probably use those words if I didn't know the caliber of your audience, but it is, first, it approaches the child as an expert, because by the time you're talking to a 6-year-old, that 6-year-old has spent 1,400 hours a year, probably more time in the last 2 years than you've spent with screens. Seriously, I'm talking about for recreational purposes. And so what I'm trying to do in schools or with parent groups or one-on-one consults with families, I want to give them a way to create an environment to access their child's expertise and excellence. They have a ton of perceptions and ideas and insights that they're never sharing. It's just all in. It's locked.
And so this process, gives them self-reflection. The interaction with them gives them a safe space for them to express it. And now you can engage the child in what they're actually thinking. Okay, so if I roll forward from this, then I would, let me make a point and you tell me if I'm wrong or not. All of the studies that you've quoted at the beginning of the negative effects, etc., are based on passive viewing of media with that effect. If you actively engage them, essentially you render all of those studies basically irrelevant, because they're not studying it from the what's possible perspective. They're looking at, okay, a kid watches screen for 3 hours a day, and therefore that's damaging, therefore ban the screen, etc., etc. Whereas if you watched it from this constructive mechanism, the outcomes would be incredible. And I remember the kids' film festival at the end of the weekend, when these 7-year-olds have the director on stage and they're nailing the director. They're like, why was the donkey doing that? That made no sense. And the director's like, holy crap, what the hell, what's happening with these kids? And it was incredible to watch the difference from the beginning of the weekend to the end of the weekend. And if I remember right, somebody did a bit of research and found that you're able to increase literacy like literally 100% in the course of a 3-day weekend.
Well, what is actually not literacy, Salim? It's actually metacognition, the ability to reflect on your own thoughts, which is conspicuously absent in the digital culture. They don't want you reflecting, honey. They want you buying and clicking and swiping. So that's a different issue.
Okay.
But I think that if we look, let's look at how we can think differently about this. I'm going to do this in 2 parts. One, the way I got to Screen Smart was not by saying, here are all the problems, because I did that workshop for 10 years before I started the ICMC, and taught, as I said, I taught for the doctors. We got the highest rating of anyone but the keynote speaker. But the point is that when I started, I didn't say, oh, I'm going to do that. What I did was talk to parents and pediatricians and counselors and other caregivers, and I ask them a single question. What does a great relationship to digital devices look like to you? If you could build that for your children, what would it look like? How do you want them to engage these amazing technologies? And so I sat and I listened for 2 years. Teachers had a different set of, let's call them wishes on their list than parents. Parents started with some really simple emotional things like, gosh, when he's really upset about something, I'd love it if he came to me instead of turning to the 6-year-old next to him. Okay, that because they're going to their peer group, they're not going to you. Okay, yeah. Teachers were really focused on the literacy part because, in their words, we're busting our hump every day for 7 hours. Kids go home, they shrug off the learning and turn on a screen. So none of all that great work that was done in the classroom, meaning character, plot, setting, compare, contrast, main idea, none of that is applied to these often narrative pieces of media that they're watching. If they're watching TV, they're watching narrative. If half of the games, 3/4 of the games now have narrative in them. If you start applying narrative constructs, you will awaken different parts of your brain than you are generally using when watching a screen or when gaming. Okay, so now set that aside. So the first thing is start from something positive. We are not helpless. We are not pebbles washed up on the digital shore. We can create the relationship we want our children to have with these devices and with this technology. That's
okay,
one.
So step me through this. I've got Milan, the 8-year-old, right?
Yes.
And Lily and I are trying to figure out how to navigate him through this world. He's, every time he sees a screen, he's like grabbing it type of thing, which is, and he's watching us interact with the screens. Where do I start?
You start with having him watch you less.
Okay.
You need to be with him.
No. So that's taken as read. We tend to put devices away and we do all that good stuff. Okay. So that's starting point. That's okay. So step one, less presence, distraction of the kid. The kid should not see you distracted to the screen, away from the child. That's one. Okay.
Then
what's number two?
A second would be that if you have to be on the screen without using a fake apology voice and without using a perfectly good reason as an excuse, narrate what you are doing.
Okay.
And it's not like, oh, honey, I can't. It's not that. It is, Milan, I'm on deadline for this. I've got 10 minutes, gonna finish it, be right back. I've done that with kids.
Okay. Now you want to have them watch something and be kind of a little more alert. Well, how do you start there?
You let him pick something he wants to watch that's not too long.
Okay.
That's number one. Number two, you sit together. You actually have a physical way that you sit when you're using books with a child. You're cuddling, and that's the way with any child, age 3 on up to 9 and 10 will still cuddle, honey. So that you're watching something, you have close physical contact. What you have to remember is that they want to share, they want to talk with us about what they experience. And this kind of interaction helps build family bonds and creates a positive expectation that they will get to interact with you more during screen use. Now, here's the thing. It also, when you say, remember how I started? I said, today we're gonna do something a little different. And the next time, today we're going to do that again. And the next time, hey, we're doing that. And that's all it is. It becomes part of what you do. Now,
okay, so now you sit with them and you watch something with them.
No, first, you don't just watch. You don't just watch.
Okay.
Because just watching is not going to do anything. It helps if you know a little bit about what the the plot is, so that you can actually, all right, so here, you're going to communicate. Watching and talking go together. That's a whole chapter in my book. Buy the book, you can see how, it's on Amazon. Co-view. When kids interact with you during screen time, they'll learn more. And then this is the part you will get comfortable with really fast. Connect the stories that they're seeing on screens to the stories they read in books. So you're going to apply your story reading skills to helping your child learn from digital devices. So here, first, I'm going to say, schedule co-viewing or even co-gaming if the game has a story for 15 minutes twice a week. Just make sure you do it. And pick a series your child loves or a short video based on a book. There are tons of these. Let's see, Weston Woods, Rabbit Ears, Kids Canopy, Kanopy. There are even Common Sense Media has some good films online. So just like reading stories at bedtime, you're going to both enjoy the contact and using a caring, playful tone to talk. And that with that kind of tone, you're going to encourage and tease out responses. Okay, so now remember, number 3, you're going to want to prime kids' minds before viewing. So it's just a few simple words. You're going to create positive expectations for this fun new way of engaging screens. And so the key is to make it sound entertaining so the kids want to pay attention. So today we're going to do something different. We're going to watch for the story in the video. And then we're going to talk about it at the end. And when we finish, maybe you can tell me the movie the same way you would tell a story. Now, this is another part of it. While they're watching, drop knowledge bombs. Sound familiar? Love that term. It's somebody came up with it.
For those on the audience, somebody asked Milan, what does his father do? And he said he drops knowledge bombs. So just yeah, okay, well, go ahead.
So you start by just naturally using some of the words character, plot, setting when you're talking with kids about a game or a video. If they're really young and they don't understand, they might ask you what the words mean, but then you have an opportunity to teach them or instruct them. And I have a ton of what I lovingly call pocket definitions. So plot is what happens in the story. Characters are the people, the animals, or the things in the story. Setting is where and when the story takes place. So ask kids using questions while the movie is going, using some of those literacy words. So why do you think the bear did that? Or why did the character do that? Is a little bit better. If they're really young, why did the character do that? What's special about that castle? Okay, instead, what's special about that setting? What changed here? See, screen talk, that's what we call screen talk. You extend learning by talking during screen time. And remember, I'm not talking every time you use a screen. I'm not talking hours and hours. I'm talking 15 minutes twice a week. But when you extend learning by talking during screen time, the way you do when reading a book to a child, you completely rehabituate their expectations for screen time. And it means that, for example, at the end of that, when you do your check-in screening, so you're going to want to, when you're reading a book, kids automatically react and share and express themselves. They're going to point out things that they saw in that book that are similar to something they saw in school or at the park. They're going to do that with any video if you've started the process. And you start the process by asking questions. And so, big bonus, they're learning to be critical thinkers and observers, not just consumers. And while they do that, they're activating multiple learning centers in the brain, as many or more than as when they're reading a book. But this issue, being Socratic, asking questions and interacting, digital media are full of entertaining details that make perfect springboards for open-ended questions.
Got it.
And they will occur to you. You can ask questions while a program is running, or what we do, we call it P&Q, pause and question. You may not want to do that. That's okay. You get a little bit more learning, but it's a good, better, best situation. Good is you prime by saying, today we're doing something different. When you watch this, I want you to think about what's going on in the story, and at the end, come tell me about it. Then you go away and prepare some food and come back. That's good. That's still better than most people. That better is where you sit with them, you're watching, and you're asking questions while it's running. In fact, I had to do that the first 3 years of Screen Smart because the school didn't have the technology that actually allowed us to stop a DVD. You think I'm kidding? I'm not.
So if you habituate this in this sense, and you've now, how many kids have gone through Screen Smart?
At least 10,000. We
Okay.
did not quantify for the quarters 3 and 4 of the 2019, no, sorry, 3 and 4 of the 2018-2019 school year. That's going to raise it up to about 10,800.
Okay, and what specific outcomes are you seeing? And
Oh,
is there a way of measuring the outcomes?
yeah, it gets really, really exciting. Well, in a classroom setting, they can measure it because they know when vocabulary is improving. For example, if we start with character plot setting, that's easy. But getting an entire body of really great adjectives and adverbs around those, teachers feedback to us within, I don't know, 3 to 4 weeks, because we are also doing the physical work with them. You remember I said we're going to use
Yeah,
our energy and our concentration to keep our minds awake. We're constantly physicalizing. I know.
I'm
Mind you,
trying to remember.
we're constantly physicalizing the way the way we're talking to them and the way we're watching screens.
Because that
So
embeds even further because of the connections, right?
muscle memory, honey. I mean, for the first time, the learning accelerates because they are getting physical activities, what we call rapidly scaffolded with kinesthetic, intellectual, visual, and auditory questions and stimulation. It moves so fast that it is really unbelievable. We're getting out, okay, in half an hour, once a week. Let me give you, I do have the first 3 stats memorized.
Okay.
80% of children ages 3, and that incidentally is lowered by the volume of pre-K kids.
Okay.
But 80% of children improve significantly to dramatically in vocabulary that is literacy related. 85% of children, for the very first time, some of them, can competently use inferential reasoning relative to media texts. Then they go back to the books and the teachers make that connection to the literacy. So we're doing it backwards almost. They're learning inferential reasoning from us and then taking that back to their reading. Okay, so first thing is vocabulary and literacy constructs. Second thing is inferential reasoning. Third thing is self-regulation. Remember what I said about, okay, so it sounded like doom and gloom from the studies, and then I really wanted to circle back to that, Salim, because it's not. It's just a study. It's an objective study. We've all got to stop reacting emotionally to information that can simply be useful to us. If I know that letting my child, whose age is 3 to 5, watch more than an hour of anything, if I know that can reorganize their white matter, you know what white matter is, it's a conductive tissue. It's like the telegraph lines up to the gray matter. If you're restructuring that when they're tiny and you're hampering their verbal development, those kids are going to fall farther and farther behind. Now, let's also be honest here. The kids who are affluent are watching less than the kids who are not. Are you aware of this? Probably were, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's one of the facts that is the most troubling about the new digital divide.
Yeah.
And then the old digital divide was, oh my gosh, everybody's got to have internet access. Everybody's got to have a screen that they can get online with, etc. That was the old digital divide. And they tried to solve that with Chromebooks and Summit Learning from, Chan Zuckerberg's foundation. Okay, they now know that that's not the way to do it. And the big pushback, and that happened in 2018, you remember, the quote, Silicon Valley was going screen free, the kids there?
Yeah.
Remember? Okay, so that was the but that meant that kids who had parents who were awake at the wheel and who were affluent would be spending much less time with screens and having much more interaction with their parents. Now, here's the thing. You can bridge that by interacting with them around screens. That's what you said at the beginning.
That's right.
And when we send kids home with the expectation that they're not only going to watch, because we know they're going to watch. I never tell them to watch. I say, if you happen to be watching, when you're at home, you're going to use your what? And they tell me their energy and their concentration. They're going to keep our minds awake. They're going to do the, and I, again, physicalize it. Talk about what you're watching. Salim, I want you to think about this just in terms of the most rudimentary brain science. 1,600 hours going in, nothing coming out. Incredible brain imbalance. And so you're not processing what you're taking in. And you cannot have kids but if they talk about it, they're processing. End of discussion. Right. Thumbs up or thumbs down is not processing. Talking about it is processing.
Got it. So I want to move to Q&A because there's a whole bunch that we've got on this. Is there, so you're seeing staggering outcomes here. Let me ask you a couple more questions on how can we help you propagate this. So number one is, I think the tack you're taking is teach parents how to navigate this with the kids. How long does it take
That's why this was written first.
Okay, yep. How long does it take for, so this is pretty simple. I could go and activate this right now with Milan, for example, right? How long do you find it takes to train a teacher to teach this Screen Smart program? If we wanted to impact, say, all the kids in Greece or Thailand, and take a whole country and say, let's just go for this, how would you go about that?
Okay, first you have to have a really good carrot. And the carrot is that you're going to use healthy tech habits to accelerate learning and close the achievement gap. So that's your carrot. Okay. They have to want to do it because they already have ways that they're doing things. Second, I'm going to say that short of having the Screen Smart program in their school where we coach them and we have online resources, if they just came for training, I'm pretty sure we can do it in a month, 3 sessions a week.
So if we you could train teachers online, presumably.
We can, absolutely.
So that means we could do some online coaching of teachers all over the world in about over the elapsed time of a month, and they could then go propagate that through the schools throughout, say, Indonesia, which is one question that has come up. Okay. Let me ask a couple more questions that have popped up. And Sam, I think you're, here's a question that we get a lot, especially for the older kids. What advice do you have for kids to critically reflect on what's true or not true versus the whole fake news type of thing? Or do you not even touch that?
No, I do. Well, you probably know that the ICMC works in 2 age groups, early childhood, 3 to 7, and then we're at the opposite end of the age spectrum with justice involved youth and with young people in jails and detention centers and shelters. And so, and that is because we really want to shut down the school to prison pipeline that exists here in the United States. That's a big part of our focus. Okay, so with youth.
Just the fact that you said that just blows my mind. The school to prison pipeline in the US. Okay, I'm just going to leave that beside. All right, go ahead, with youth.
Okay, so with youth, they have to have ownership of a process, and you have to engage them in a process. And what I'm doing with youth 90% of the time will either be curatorial work. Now, I want you to think about this. If I show them short media and they're evaluating it, and they are thinking about the criteria for something that they're going to curate. It can be an online event. It can be music. It can be art. It can be whatever it is. They first have to critique whatever they're going to curate. And then they have a little database of all the votes from their critiques. And then they have consensus, and then they have their final event. Okay. So what we're doing is activating critical thinking as part of something that they have ownership of, and then linking that to things as phenomenally important as understanding that okay, Facebook is not used by younger folk anymore, but TikTok, this is curating. Whatever
Right.
you put up there is curating. What
Right.
comes first, what comes second. It's not just live news feed. That's a ridiculous model. That's just, you observing your own digital media navel. Who cares? I mean, there are just a few people that are going to be interested in that. That's come and gone. We've seen it a million times by now.
Have you run the experiment of having a school, an entire school curate their own kids' film festival?
Yeah.
And then essentially, so then they're running the filter nonstop anyway, because they're picking the films, deciding, and then they're getting engaged. I got it. Okay. So
and every age group does their own. It's all age appropriate, Salim. You can't put the 8th graders in with the 1st graders. Doesn't work. Yeah.
Got that. Okay. I'm going to open it up for questions. Who's got questions? And I'm going to continue responding to the stuff that is showing up here. Orlando Reese is asking, is there a affiliate in Brazil or something similar to it?
We'd love there to be.
Okay, not yet, but talk to Nicole, and we'll put out your contact details towards the end. Does anybody want to ask a verbal question while we have Nicole on the line? And if you do, raise your hand, and Sam has some technology magic to figure out how to answer that question. Where do you go next with this? Like, if you could wave a wand, what would you have happen over the next year or two?
Waving a wand, my goodness. All right. You have to have both parts of the culture engaged in this. You've got to have the teachers and you've got to have the parents. The teachers can actually initiate, because as kids come home with their screen smart skills, parents get really impressed and excited. And they also notice that it's easier for them to talk to their children about setting those pesky limits. That's one thing.
Yeah.
In the best of all possible worlds, there would be buy-in at the district level in every major city in the country, in my country, in Canada, so that in these big urban areas where the kids are most at risk of falling behind and getting into that school to prison pipeline, we can close the achievement gap. We can at the same time bring the program with different focus to the affluent schools. Can I tell you what the difference is when these schools approach us? It's kind of interesting. Okay, so we have right now an open scholarship appeal for schools who have nothing, who want the Screen Smart program. What they're saying, at the top of their list is self-regulation. The second thing is literacy. The third is social emotional learning. With the affluent schools, you flip that. The first is social emotional, empathy, engagement, picking moments of compassion out of the digital world and bringing them into the real world. That's what they want. And then from there, yes, of course, they're always happy to have higher order thinking skills added to the mix. And they're always happy to have kids express themselves better, because that's a huge part of modern learning that is missing. You know that, right, Salim? That with all the time kids are spending with digital devices and with new all digital classrooms, when do you talk to someone? And so the beauty of creating community around a screen with the Screen Smart approach really helps in the affluent schools.
Amazing.
It really helps with affluenza. So yeah, so I want big district buy-in. I want teachers, probably 100,000 teachers trained. Why not? Why? Because everyone's going to be using these things. They're not going away.
No, in fact, propagating even more. Folks, we put Nicole's media and contact information and link on there on the chat board. Does anybody have a question that they want to ask? Or I'm going to keep continuing asking the questions that I see. Global Girls Initiative, can you talk about that?
Sure. That's that older age part of the group. Global Girls, and we're going to be doing a big push for it for Giving Tuesday, really focuses on female-centric topics and female-centric films, and gives girls an incredibly powerful and youth-driven space to talk about how they're represented in media, what they feel about it, what they would prefer to see happening, and they curate a festival and make a movie. So it is an 18-week residency and has extremely powerful outcomes, not just in terms of critical thinking, but what's really cool is that if you send your film to us, to the ICMC, for use in something like Global Girls, any comment that the girls write on their ballots is shared with directors. So you're getting group feedback from really, really interesting groups of people. And then their final festival is marketed to the general public. So it's not just a closed door event. It's something that we do at theaters throughout Chicago, and have been asked to do it in a couple of other states as well. I did the first one in Florida, in Sarasota. Been asked recently to do one in California. We'll see.
How does one submit a film?
That's you go to the ICMC website and click.
Okay.
You'll get an entry form and you submit a film.
Okay. What's the reception that you're getting from teachers versus parents versus government officials around this?
Okay, I've been remiss in the government portion. I'm going to be very honest. I think I said at an earlier workshop, Salim, that I've tried very hard to stay out of silos. And so silo number one was the academic silo. Love you, academics, but I mean, I couldn't have done nearly as much work as I have for the last 8 years in schools with thousands of kids if I'd been in academia. So so teachers need what we lovingly call a buy-in meeting. It doesn't take long, because basically I'm going to be helping them do everything they want to do. I'm going to be making their lives easier. They love this additional student engagement. Honey, when self-regulation and focus goes up, you get higher student engagement. So kids learn better overall. So they love that. They love the fact that everything that they're teaching, is getting underlined. I'm talking from the literacy standpoint, is getting a big underline and a big boost, because kids love learning from screens, especially if they're interacting. So teachers, I can give a couple of exceptions for pushbacks, but there would always be a pushback. There would always be an immune system response. Absolutely. There are some experts in early childhood who would wonder why we're having kids do hand movements, for example, right before they watch a film. Well, I can tell you why. Because you're energizing the cerebrospinal fluid, you're getting them to straighten their backs, you're getting energy throughout their whole bodies, and physical energy drives brain function, and the physicalization acts as a muscle memory to retain the learning better. So that all of those things, we probably, when I said that we've been remiss in not going to governments, that is part of the problem. But the other part is that people need to understand that solutions are not going to come from academic sources. What is developed in academia stays in academia. And as much as I love universities and love those folks and work with them, I have not seen a methodology that is as fully developed and calibrated as this one anywhere. And if there were such a methodology, I would be thrilled to see it. I just haven't. And so again, remember, starting from the positive, what do we want for our kids? We want them to be self-aware while using screens, to be able to check back in with their bodies, to be able to notice how they're being affected. We want them to be able to talk about what they're watching. We want them to not be segregated and lose the ability to interact with each other just because they're using screens. Those are some really simple goals, and that's what this program was designed to do. Parents are harder because they feel guilt already, and they feel overwhelmed, and the technology changes all the time. And what has to happen, and I'm going to go to one of your key points, Salim, you've got to get out of thinking that kids and screens is an either or, black and white, turn it off or use it. That's
Right.
all nonsense. It is an ecosystem. The way we are engaging technology is itself an eco. You have to understand how the ecosystem works. You have to know where you need to put in some of the energy. You have to know what some of the best structures are for moving forward. Because yes, limitations are a help, but they're not. If they're the only help, guess what? Everything becomes forbidden fruit, and you get into the personality. It's the personality tug of war with kids. You have to have an understanding of how the ecosystem of digital devices works in the ecosystem of your family and the child's brain. That's all. You want this conserved for the future. You want this growing. You want the whole child's whole personality to remain vibrant. That's a really powerful motivation. And there are no reasons not to learn things like, what is a family tech agreement? A family tech agreement, pretty soon those will become automatic, but a family tech agreement evolves over time. And it starts with, yes, it starts with limits, but here is the most important thing in it. IRL, whatever you do in real life, IRL, whatever you do in real life, however you interact with others, whatever I've told you about that, meaning you don't push other kids down on the playground, you don't scream, you don't jump up and down on somebody when they happen to borrow a toy without asking. There are certain codes of behavior that you have in your family. Whatever those codes are, they apply to digital devices. And you need to make that connection for the kids because it's not evident.
So I'm gonna try and summarize this because I've actually been taking notes. So let's see if I captured some of what you said.
Friend.
Yeah, this is the testing part now. So to summarize, what you've done is you've basically said, rather than kids passively watching a screen and just consuming, activate their brains and have them be more proactive and be self-aware, self-reflective as to how are they feeling, questioning about what's happening on the screen, engaging with them. And the way you engage with the kids is, first of all, be less distracted yourself on a device and put it away when you're with them. Or if you all have to be, tell them why you're on the phone or picking up something.
Narrate, remember that word, narrate what you're doing, go.
Let the kids pick something that they want to watch, sit together with close physical interaction and watch it with them. Connect screen time and the stories to books, and ask them to start watching and using the words like plot, character, setting, etc. So they have self-reflection around that, and ask questions as to why the character is doing what changed, etc. Screen talk. And then what you're seeing as a result is just 30 minutes a week of doing this, 2 15-minute sessions. 80% of kids are seeing incredible inferential reasoning, or 85% of kids. 80% of kids have incredibly high vocabulary increases, and now magically they're able to self-regulate.
It's not magical. It's,
well, I mean, auto-magically, yeah.
But yes. And I would say it's really just think about the kinds of questions you ask your child or your child asks you when you're reading a book. It's just you let those same kind of questions occur to you when you start watching, and you let the child ask you questions. That's all. Right. You're talking around it. And what we found, even in terribly difficult, challenging situations in schools, was that kids were perfectly capable of watching, cuddling and answering a question, and then framing questions of their own and pointing out things that they were noticing. And even a simple question like, so what do you think is going to happen next? Well, why do you think that happened? Well, what should that character do right now? Well, how would you have ended that? There are a million questions. It's very natural. You do it the same way you read a book to a child.
Excellent. So we're going to wrap it up. First of all, I want to thank Nicole Dreiske from the International Center for Media for Children. Did I get that right? International Children's Media Center, ICMC. And we've posted the website. There you go. We've posted the website and phone number there. We will be engaging with you as a community, as the EXO community, to help you propagate this. Because if we can crack this one little problem of how kids relate to screens globally, just that will transform the world. And we are interested in transforming the world for a better future. So with that, thank you folks for all the folks that participated. We'll be sending the link out and making the link to this video and this interview available to the general public, and you can kind of propagate that and share that around. Thank you all for your questions. And most of all, Nicole, thank you for everything that you're doing for that younger generation. God bless. God bless their future. All right. Thanks, folks. We're going to wrap it up here. And Samantha, thanks for all the help. All right. Bye, all.